All right, thank you guys very much for being with us. I'm going to kind of quickly jump right into it, guys. Quick intros, and then let's jump into the meat of this thing.
Sure. So I'm Mada. I'm one of the founders of Branch. Branch is a linking platform. So we help mobile apps create links that work across all platforms. So regardless of if a user clicks on iOS, Android, desktop, we make sure they get to the right spot, either on the web or in-app.
And I'm Ron Palmieri, founder and CEO of Layer. If you've used the conference app to message somebody, that's powered by Layer. We deliver a communication service to embed in web and mobile apps, have customers like Nordstrom, Staples, Weight Watchers, big companies, but love working with the Web Summit team across all the different conferences.
So one of the first things I want to just jump right into it with you guys and ask, what are some of the core tenets of being mobile first and having a powerful mobile first strategy? Mada, what would you say?
So it's really interesting. When you hear mobile first, a lot of brands think, oh, we need an iOS app. That's what it means to be mobile first. I think mobile has become more and more fragmented in the past years. So being mobile first actually means understanding where your customers are on mobile and having a presence there, and making sure that you unifies your presence across all the different fragmented ecosystems. And by that I mean, Facebook on mobile, people messaging about your brand in WeChat, having a website that works well on mobile, having apps that work on both iOS and Android. If people talk about your products, having something like an iMessages app and things like that. So making sure that when you say mobile first, you don't just think about one platform, but you actually work cross-platforms and create a unified experience. And obviously, even if we look at someone like Collision, and the app is a great way they're going mobile first, but they have a mobile-optimized website. They send people emails that work on, that take people to the app and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, too, is as you look at the data, I don't know if any of you follow ComScore, but it's a good free data set. More and more people are using mobile to visit brands, and mobile still doesn't convert as well. So actually, if you look at the data, it's almost approaching 75% of the visits from consumers to companies are increasingly mobile, but mobile still doesn't convert nearly as well as desktop. So a lot of the focus from our standpoint is how do you build interfaces that address more complicated purchases or more more considered purchases, and do it in a way that kind of is optimized for mobile from a user experience standpoint.
Yeah, and even if you think about where do people convert, and just to kind of follow up on that, it's actually people convert twice as well in-app on average, but that's not always the case. Like there are times when you should take someone to a mobile website if they don't have the app. So making sure that you know where they convert best, and not just in general, but for your brand specifically, and creating the right experience for them.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, which is that show of hands here. How many of you guys are early stage startup? First few years, okay. So a lot of people, and I think that what's very confusing is that a lot of the advice on how to truly be mobile first, it seems to change year in, year out. And I think that there are probably a few core fundamentals that you have to embrace regardless of the year. I mean, what are you seeing from a trend standpoint? The brands that are winning, can you name one or two that you feel are doing a great job at really embracing this type of mentality?
I can start. I think one thing that's really still hard on mobile is acquiring new customers. So the discovery of apps is still something that hasn't been solved. So you can buy app install ads, but it's hard to get to the right customer, and it's hard to get your app discovered because of the content in your app. Because there's not one place that indexes app content. So one thing that I've seen that brands do really well, and Jet.com is someone that worked with us to do this, is actually use mobile web and SEO to get users to their pages. So they write content, they have inbound links, and when you search for something, you will get to a Jet.com page. But they know that their users convert much better in apps. So what they do is that they use banners and interstitials to take people from that mobile website into the app. And they do a really clever thing. So you get to a page for like toothpaste or something, and they have a banner that says, buy the same product in-app, and you'll get 20% off. So then if they go to the App Store, they deep link them to the same place that they were on the mobile website, but now they get a 20% off. So people are incentivized to go and get the app. And now that they have the app, they own the user, they can send them push notifications, they can do in-app messaging. So I thought that there was like a really clever way to use the web and SEO as a way to get users, because it's cheaper and easier, but then convert them into the app where the conversion is higher, although just getting people to the app would be a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I mean, some companies will talk about the customer journey. Typically, it's very fragmented. So someone might come to the desktop app or to the browser, the mobile app, and it'll be very disjointed, and there won't be continuity across. So things like deep linking strategies, being able to get brought into a context that makes a lot of sense is really important. And even using things like email or SMS or in-app messaging to create kind of like what I kind of refer to as a symmetrical experience. So I can start a conversation in one place, have the continuity of that elsewhere, and it's really fundamentally geared towards trying to help that customer through whatever that initial acquisition funnel is, and then to provide support in a more kind of contextualized way. So think of it almost as like a one-to-one conversation that kind of maps across all the different platforms.
And I think just to follow up on that, Ron, I think that what's interesting is that a lot of people don't really, they think about mobile from like a UX standpoint, from a site or an app that you're going to go to. They don't often think about the messaging component and how important it is to get that right. And I feel like that's what I've noticed in my research, a very big differentiator between the brands that are making mobile work for them and the ones that aren't, no?
Yeah, well, thank you for the softball. Yeah, we're big believers in that as well. I mean, I think the interesting thing about, people have been, you asked the question, like, what are people doing well and what are, in our industry, unfortunately, there are these hype cycles, and so one of the things we've seen is a lot of emphasis on bots. And, in our view, a bot is just a facilitator of a conversation. Sometimes that conversation is best served with a human. Sometimes it's best served with a combination of machine. But ultimately, what do we humans do really well is that machines, really don't is empathy. And a really big part of this thing, whether it's in-app messaging or something else, it's really about creating kind of an empathetic experience so that your customer feels connected to the brand and to the brand experience and all of that. So bots might be one of those kind of cautionary tales, I think, is about being potentially overused. But the conversation is really kind of in our view is very important, irrespective of whether or not it's done through kind of conventional interfaces or messaging-based interfaces.
By the way, about that fun drinking game, every time somebody says bot or AI at Collision, do a shot, you will be dead in like 14 minutes. Because I think that a lot of people, like, it kind of gets lost in this messaging that there are a lot of different, bots can mean a lot of different things. AI can mean a lot of different things. And same thing from a user experience standpoint, such an important thing to think about unifying the experience. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like a brand, to be empathetic, you have to think about, you were talking about mobile first, but still making it harmonious with the desktop experience.
Exactly.
And making that, so how do you make that harmonious? How would you recommend?
That's a softball, obviously, for me. What you have to think about is when you create a link to something, a link to content, you don't know, you have no idea where someone is going to click on that link. It could be on the desktop, it could be in WeChat, it could be on Facebook, it could be on their watch. So what you need to understand is when you create a link to a piece of content, it has to work everywhere, and it has to have the right experience everywhere. So for big brands, it's not really a big problem because they have a website, so they have the same content on a desktop website. But how about a tiny brand that doesn't have a website and they just build an app? So it's important to have landing pages and things that give them a preview of the experience and then take them back to the app. So we have this product called Deep Views that basically, if you're on desktop and you click, it actually shows a preview of what the app content is going to be, and then you can text yourself a link to the app. And this is just an example. But the other thing that's important, especially if you're a big brand, is that the experience, the same link can take people to very different experiences on desktop versus a mobile app versus a mobile website. And you need to always keep in mind the platform and customize the experience based on that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, I actually think that's one of the things that a lot of brands are missing in this, is that it's about the end user, and it's about understanding something about the end user. So if the end user is on a tablet, not to say everybody on a tablet is doing the same thing, it tells you something about them. Same thing about mobile. There's all this data that as a brand you're bringing in, and I feel like it's important to use that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges, large brands especially have this just because of the way technology has been built up, but most companies really do a very poor job of kind of creating kind of coherency or consistency in the way they interact with their customers. So fragmentation of experience based on channel is probably one of the biggest challenges that companies have. So if you're smaller and you're building, you want to build a mobile-first experience, being thoughtful about what is that customer path and does it provide kind of consistency or coherency is really important. Because again, like the example is, you call a call center, someone says, oh, I can't help you, and they transfer you to somebody else, and you have to retell your life story again.
Yeah, exactly.
These are the kinds of things that can be done on mobile in a really interesting way. The way I kind of put it is, these devices are personal in a way that our PCs kind of never were because they're with us all the time. It's a real opportunity for a user-centric design process to understand, how to reach that person in a way that provides real value. And it's very different, I think, than the technology foundations that we've dealt with call center, email, and the like previously.
And I can't tell you how many times I see brands who don't give that experience. Like I'm in Facebook and I see an amazing dress and I click on it and it takes me to a website where I don't go to this dress, or it takes me to the App Store and I download an app and then I can't see that dress anymore. And it doesn't make sense. Like the app or the brand has that information and has the context of how I found, or of my search on Google, or the thing that I clicked, or whatever was shared with me from a friend. And that context always needs to be used, because when someone interacts with your brand, it's really like dating. The first time they come to your app or your website is the first date, and you have to give them the best experience. And if you already know what they're looking for, why wouldn't you take them there? Don't go and take them to like a 10-step onboarding thing about your app. When you know they want to get to a dress, take them to the dress. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen brands do. And part of it is technological, but there are solutions that solve that. And we help solve that on mobile and apps, but even on the web, it's not that hard. So it boggles my mind that people don't already do that.
Now I really want to know about this dress, because it sounds really worth tracking down. But
yeah, well, I buy 90% of my clothes because of Facebook ads. So when I click on something, I always want to be taken to
there.
that.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't have that much time. You end up, if people put things in front of me, I end up buying them. So.
So the other point that I'll often talk about, especially with startups, is what is unique about the experience that you're trying to create. I think, in the world where Amazon is selling more and more things, and I kind of joke that Amazon is sort of like the apex predator of bundlers now, because they're literally pulling everything together underneath the Amazon Prime. Jeff Bezos made a comment that when Amazon wins a Golden Globe, it helps them sell more shoes. If you think about the range of the things that they do. So for companies, and this really now includes literally everybody else that's not at the top of the food chain, what is unique about the product and the experience that you're creating? Because we're all, in effect, unbundlers, because only Amazon is at the top of that. And so it's a really interesting thing when you start out with that premise. What is unique about your product? What is unique about your experience? And then track that all the way down through how your customer engages you, how they get support. Mobile is increasingly critical because of the amount of time we all spend on those devices, but it has to be inclusive of kind of the overall experience across the different platforms. So, I think in terms of like what our two companies do, obviously we try to create this great conversation or communications experience across all these devices, but being able to provide deep links into these platforms, bringing you back into the context is really important. And when you see it done poorly, it really feels bad. You know,
Yeah,
when we see
exactly.
it done really well, it should be delightful. You know, and
People don't notice it. When it's done well, people don't notice
exactly.
it.
And you almost shouldn't notice. I mean, it should be seamless.
Exactly.
I mean, it's in a lot of organizations, you're right, haven't necessarily embraced the fact that they have to make an investment in some way, shape, or form, and from a strategy standpoint or from a tool set standpoint. But we don't have to name names. If you want to, that's fine. I mean, are there any examples that you found about certain things that, at their core, a number of different brands are just not getting right in terms of being mobile first?
I mean, I kind of just said mine. I think it's not really forgetting about certain parts of the ecosystem. So it's not even about linking or anything. It's just like they forget that some people can click on a link on, you know, like a Kindle Fire or something, and you click on something on Android and it doesn't take you anywhere because they don't have an Android app. And you shouldn't, like if someone clicks on it on Android and don't have an Android app, take them to a website that tells them about your iOS app or tells them about your experience, shows them something about your brand. Don't forget one piece of the ecosystem. Make sure that you like look through all of them. So I've seen so many broken experiences because people just focus on like a part of the ecosystem and they forgot about the 10, 20% of users that are not part of that and now get a horrible experience and complain about that. You don't want to have detractors. So that would be one that I notice a lot, and I've seen even really large brands, mistakes that even really large brands do.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my current fixation is every airline. And and it's funny because I fly a number of different, we travel all the time. And what amazes me is I have the app on my phone, and I get some push notification, maybe the better ones use a push notification. And when I get it, I try to tap it, and I have no ability to get like drawn into any kind of direct interaction. It's literally like, your flight is canceled. Thank you very much. And then you go in and you look, and the only thing you can do from the mobile app that just sent me a push notification is a list of country telephone numbers. Like this is JetBlue's experience, for example, which I fly a lot. And it's amazing to me that the experience could be so much better where I get the push notification and it literally could bring me through a flow that says, well, this flight is canceled, the next flight is this, would you like to get booked on it? You could imagine a very different experience that would be mobile first. And as a frequent flyer, would be fundamentally better and raise the bar, frankly, across the entire industry. And I think that's just an example, but like every airline is horrendous. And you think about like when do you want an optimized mobile experience? When you're traveling and some event, I don't know, what did United call it, a reaccommodation occurs, it's like when a reaccommodation occurs, you don't want to get dragged off and beaten, but that's kind of the experience that they feel like that they're delivering in their mobile apps right now.
There's no better way to end a panel with the phrase dragged out and beaten. So I want to thank you guys so much for the time. We could have spent another 20 minutes on this easy. Very informative. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.